Hey, Thrill Maxers, welcome to another exciting episode of Talk Around the Park. I am so excited for this video today because we have some awesome special guests. We're going to be talking about a park that a lot of Americans haven't been to. It's over in Japan. It's called Fuji-Q Highland. But before we start talking about the park, we have two special guests tonight. The first one is one of the Thromax administrators. He's an awesome guy. I'm sure all of you guys know him. Let's welcome Sam to the show tonight. Hey, Sam, how you doing, buddy?
Good. About yourself?
Doing pretty good, man. I just let everybody know we're going to be talking about Fuji-Q Highland. Sam is one of the Thromax admin. I'm sure you guys see him all the time. Super knowledgeable about coasters. And the park that we're going to talk about is on our bucket list. So I'm super, super excited to get into this tonight. But before we do, me and Sam have another guest for you. And this guy's broadcasting right now live all the way from England, but he has been to Fuji-Q. He has documented it thoroughly. But let's welcome all the way from England today, Luke Evans. That's right, Luke E94 is with us tonight. Hey, Luke.
How's it going?
Pretty good. We just let everybody know that you are broadcasting live from across the pond, as they say.
Certainly am, my friends. Welcome to overcast England.
Awesome. And how's before we jump into this park, we're super excited to start talking about this, but how's everything going in England? How are you holding up, buddy?
Not too bad, thanks. There's now 2 C words you're not allowed to say on YouTube in fear of getting demonetized. One of them is 4 letters and the other one is far too many. But basically, yeah, all's good at the moment. Looking forward to get back on some coasters, but in the meantime, it's time for some self-isolation and some self-indulgence and some coaster talk.
Yeah, and we really, me and Sam and all of our members and fans out there really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's about noon, closer to 1 o'clock our time, so it's almost 7 o'clock p.m. You're about 6 hours ahead of us, right?
Certainly is. Yeah, this is a weird thing that happens. This happened first time to me, this whole time difference, when I went to Silver Dollar City and I got off the ride and suddenly I was 20 years ahead of everyone. Not sure how that happened, but it seemed to have followed me across the pond.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about a park that you have documented thoroughly, that you have been there. Me and Sam have not. It is on our bucket list, and I'm sure on many others' bucket lists. And that is Fuji-Q Highland. Do you want to just briefly talk about your adventures to Fuji-Q and how do you get there? Where is it located? Just a little bit about the park itself before we dive into all the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the park is located about an hour or so away from the base of Mount Fuji. Now, don't expect to go into Mount Fuji and then make your way to the park. In fact, you'll probably more likely end up going to either Haneda or Narita Airport in Tokyo and then head out of the city. It probably takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there if you leave from the city centre. But once you're there, you're sure to find awesome rides, amazing food, and a really weird atmosphere. It's amazing, but it feels like, imagine a carnival with extreme thrill rides. It's weird, but definitely go there if you get a chance.
Okay, and do you remember about how much it costs to get into the park?
I think it was in the vicinity of about $50, but you can actually request a pass where if you're just there for media, you can go in for free, but you can't go on the rides as it's all scanned with facial recognition. So,
yeah, and that's something we're going to talk about here in a little bit because the park, besides all the attractions and stuff, they have some really cool operations that I have not seen other parks do, especially here in the U.S. They have not done as much as Fuji-Q has to modernize the experience. But we'll get into that here in a minute. Our first segment, and the first question is, what audience would you say that the park is geared towards?
I definitely have to rule in favour of extreme thrill seekers. I mean, you've got rides to cater for a younger demographic, but I can't picture any toddlers going on Eejanaika or Do-Dodonpa for that matter.
Yeah.
Although it would be legit.
Yeah. And Sam, what do you think? Just by looking at all the stuff.
I think that it's like a thrill seeker's paradise. But however, their website says that it's actually for all family members, which I found kind of interesting.
Maybe babies are going to get on Do-Dodonpa.
There you go, look.
There you
I know
go.
what my kid's first ride's going to be.
Yeah. So okay, I would agree. I think thrill seekers, and once we get into our next segment here, which is the park's ride lineup, I think it'll become clear. But there is a few family things that people can do. But let's talk about the ride lineup. Let's start before we get into the creme de la creme, the coasters. Let's talk about some of the flats and water rides. Sam, through your research, what did you find with flats and water rides? Did you find anything interesting when you were looking at this?
They have a really unique dark ride. I don't remember exactly what it's called because it's in Japanese, but it looks incredibly awesome.
Cool.
And I think there was like a power tower type thing, like a drop tower, and they had like flyers, which was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, like the Star Flyers type ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I know just through my research, they do have a couple of water rides. They have a shoot the shoots. It looks like an Intamin. I don't know if it is an Intamin, but it looks like an Intamin shoot the shoots. Could be an old Arrow. If you're playing Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, it would be the splash boats. And they also have a river rapids ride. It looks like it's pretty small. Luke, when you were there, do you remember the water attractions or seeing the water attractions?
I remember someone pointing out to me that one of the water rides, I believe you mentioned it was called Shoot the Shoots.
Mm-hmm.
They said, oh, look, it's coming down in very broken English, but mad props to anyone who tries to speak English. And they said, oh, quick, grab picture. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Quickly pretended to snap a photo and then proceeded straight to Eejanaika, because when you've got rides like that, you don't have time to do everything. You've just got to pick and choose, especially with the queues as well. Now, I had actually gone just at the tail end of Golden Week, which is one of the busiest times over in Japan for religious reasons and the seeing in of a new emperor. But luckily, the park was fairly quiet, but I didn't want to take any chances. So.
Okay. I know flats. There's one flat ride in your video. If you guys haven't seen, check out Luke's channel, Lukey94, because he has a full review on, like a park tour where he goes through and he shows you all the different things that he went on. The cool thing is that the park does allow for on-ride footage if you have the proper gear. So he has all that on-ride footage. They do have a Star Flyer. They do have a pendulum kind of ride. I'm not sure who makes it. It looks like it's the Zamperla model. It's one of the smaller ones, so think like Maxx Air at Cedar Point kind of height. It kind of looks like that. They do have an S&S, one of their space shots, except it doesn't shoot you up. It actually brings you up, fills up with the air, and then it's the reverse bungee, so it shoots you down. And then there's one, and this is what I want you to talk about, Luke. There's one crazy flat ride over there. I don't know who makes it, but it looks like a plane, and you have handles, and you move the wings, right, to flip upside down. And tell everyone about this ride, because, man, it looks like you were having fun in your video.
I must admit, it's pretty legit. It's basically, it's called Tentamushi, so if you want to look that up, it does feature in the video, but I'm sure there's people that talk about it in way more detail than me, just giggling for 4 minutes straight. The only other one of those kind of rides I've experienced is here in the UK at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And basically, you've got these two kind of handles. You go up and down, but it controls the fins like that. And once you get into momentum, you eventually start to kind of spin, and sort of like a controlled spin. But, a lot of people do one or two, and they kind of just leave it at that. I think I got about... Not going to tell you how many I've got. Check the video out. See if you can stomach it, because when you watch it, you'll see just how nauseating it is. It's in the
Yeah.
40s.
Yeah. Did you see that
Whoa.
one, Sam? Did you see that, what we're talking about, that flat ride over there?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Insane. 46 or 47 flips, something like that you got?
Yeah, they were all cheering me. I had no idea why everyone was so excited. I was just like, "Whoa, okay, what's going on?" Like,
I don't think I
but I
could
got the
stomach
high
that.
score. So.
Yeah, that it looked nuts. I know here in the U.S., I know there is one that I know of. It's at the Nickelodeon Universe Park,
Oh, is
and
that in Minnesota?
yes, and it's themed to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's cool because the little carriages that you're on look like little turtle shells. So
Awesome.
it's pretty neat. I think that, and then the only other one that I can think of is in Canada's Wonderland. So not very popular. Not it's more of a rare model, but it looks like a bunch of fun.
Oh yeah, it's really good.
So that leads us to, we talk about rides. We got to talk about the 4 headliner attraction. That is their 4 coasters, guys. If you don't know,
4 headliners.
yeah. I made this analogy as we were talking before the show. This, to me, this park reminds me of Holiday World here in the U.S. It's kind of like the Holiday World of Japan in the sense that they only have 4 coasters, 4 big coasters. But man, you talk about making it count. This park makes it count. If you're only going to have 4, this is the way to do 4. Luke, why don't you? Well, let's start with Sam real quick. Sam, why don't you give your overall opinion, overall thoughts of what you're seeing on these rides, and then Luke, why don't you fill in with more details and stuff? Let's start off with, because I got my list. Let's start off with the, I guess number 4 of the 4, which is hard to do. But let's talk about Takabisha. Sam, why don't you tell everyone what Takabisha is?
So that is a Gerstlauer, I guess infinity coaster, I think is what the model type is, and it's got a 121-degree drop, which literally is insane. It was the steepest in the world until the coaster opened up in New Jersey at the American Dream Mall. That's like 0.2 degrees steeper. And that ride looks like it packs a serious punch.
Yeah, Luke, why don't you tell us about your experience on it and talk about how crazy this ride is, because it's got a bunch of stuff going for it. It's a launch coaster. It's got all kinds of stuff.
It was fast. It was steep, and a lot of people screamed, myself included.
That drop. They say it's the steepest, at the time, steepest drop in the world, and still the second steepest drop in the world, 121 degrees. Is it as crazy as it sounds? Does it feel as crazy as it sounds?
There's several elements to the ride, and I have to say that's probably one of the less significant elements, because it's like the only intense element you can see on the ride. Everything else looks like a kind of conventional maneuver. With the exception of a few notable kind of elements like the banana roll that you'd only really know about if you was an enthusiast. But I'll give you a hint as to where you might find the other elements. I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say, if you imagine the difference between a day and a night rides feel more intense because you can't really see what's around you and where you're going. That being said, take a look at some off-ride footage of the newest sleeper coaster in the world, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in New Jersey, and have a look at that first kind of like JoJo roll, where how close it gets to the supports and the ground, and then do that in the dark, which you do on Takabisha. And I think it's that kind of that cognitive function in your brain where it's like you feel you're closer than you actually are because you can't see it. There's no sense of depth. And that was one of the more interesting elements, considering it's not going fast at all, but in your mind you might as well be going 200 miles an hour because it feels that scary. And you know what I will tell you, for the fans out there that have stuck around for long enough, I will tell you the other cool element of this ride, and that's definitely the launch. Like you drop down into this little kind of bump, and it's kind of like when you come out of the Bolton after the secret element on that. Except this one is just pedal to the metal, off you go, and it's legit. Word of the day, legit.
And it's funny that you're saying, you know, you as soon as you hit that launch, that you're off to the races. And it's funny that you talk about it on this ride, because there's another launch coaster in the park that takes that to an extreme. Like, if they would have just had the launch on Takabisha, you could say, wow, they have a really great launch coaster. You know, it's forceful. It's you get going real fast, right? But that's like the baby launch coaster of the park, and that's because Sam, why don't you tell them what's the next launch coaster? What am I talking about here?
Do-Dodonpa.
Do-Dodonpa, and what's so significant about Do-Dodonpa?
So there's a lot of things. It is the fastest accelerating coaster in the entire world. It's 0 to 111 miles an hour in less than 2 seconds. And I think it's like 1.56 seconds. And it's literally pedal to the metal and you go. Like, watching Luke's video is just crazy. He puts it in as best perspective as he possibly could.
Coolest thing you did in that video or on that segment when you're doing the ride is putting the speedometer on the side and then timing it, because you really get a sense of, oh my gosh, you're already at 112. What? I blinked and it was that quick. So I have 2 questions for you, Luke. First question is going to be, for us here in the States, the closest thing we have to Do-Dodonpa is Maxx Force at Six Flags Great America. It launches 0 to 78 in 1.8 seconds. Do-Dodonpa goes 0 to 112 in 1.56 or 1.57 seconds. So it launches 45 miles an hour faster in 0.3 seconds faster of a time. Tell us, first of all, is Maxx Force, because they say it's the closest thing, is it close at all to Do-Dodonpa?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, a lot of people, they mistake an extra couple of miles an hour for, oh, this ride is going to be leagues better. I mean, in this instance, we are talking 10, 20, 30 miles an hour faster. But I think it's the mechanics behind it. As this is all compressed air, it's the instant gratification that deems this ride so intense. You know, you've got catapults and you've got LSMs, LIMs, you name it. But Maxx Force, to be honest, if you're looking to kind of get the Do-Dodonpa experience on a bit of a budget, it's your best shot. I would even go as far as to say this is more true to the experience than, say, Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point or King of the Car Great Adventure.
Okay. And that's cool because we rode, for those of you who don't know, actually not very many of you probably would, when Luke visited Six Flags Great America in 2019, I met him at the park, and we rode his first ride on Maxx Force. I was sitting right next to him and got that. Yeah, that was awesome. And so I've always wondered, is it really, because everyone says it's close. But tell me, can words even describe that long? I mean, because you personally, you've said that launch coasters are your least favorite kind of coasters to go on, right? And here you are on the most extreme launch coaster in the world. Tell me how that went. How did that go?
Well, if you actually go back and watch the video, you'll notice when it does the countdown and they do launch time 3, 2, 1. Apparently, I got quite a rare experience where the voice actor actually said Do-Dodonpa before the train launched. Usually, you hear it as you're, well, there's no other way to say it, yeeted down the track. For those of you that don't know what yeeted is, it just means like chucked. And I remember you can see it in the footage. I sit there and you can just see me kind of wince because I'm preparing for this thing, and I've accepted my fate. And then they buy me about another second and a half. And I think the worst thing is knowing that in the time it took for them to say Do-Dodonpa, if they hadn't have said that and it had just launched after the countdown, I would have already conquered my biggest fear. So it was almost like I'd prepared for the trauma twice, because I'd psyched myself up for it. I was like, okay, here we go. And then he spoke, and I'm like, okay, maybe there'll be like a little pause, or the fins will drop or something. But no, you're just shot straight out of that tunnel. And to be honest, I'm sure a lot of the audience here want to know this. Rather than kind of watching the speedometer kind of go up, and you see just how quick it gets to that speed, it feels more as if the needle's bounced up and then it's slowly decelerating for the rest of the ride.
Okay.
A lot of coasters, they've got terrain and gravity to factor in to maintain momentum, but these rides hit so hard and so fast, you basically feel like you're decelerating.
Nice. I can attest to that on Maxx Force. The minute you leave that launch, whatever you call it, catch car, you immediately feel like you slow down. Do you get that feeling too, Sam?
Yeah, I feel like it does slow down. Like once you start getting up into the double inversion loop, not really loop, the double inversion, it does start slowing down drastically.
Yeah.
And yet the crazy part is that ride still has the fastest inversion in the world at the end of the ride.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So then that's going to move us to, and even though the next coaster has the nickname the King of Coasters, I'd argue that the last coaster we're going to talk about is the King of Coasters. But the next one is called Fujiyama. Fujiyama, for those of you who don't know, it's a Togo hyper coaster, stands at 79 meters, which is 259 feet. Highest drop's 230 feet. This looks awesome. And this looks so cool because it looks like they took a couple of elements from a traditional hyper with a couple of big airtime hills, and then they mixed it with like a twister kind of layout. So it looks like they took the two, mashed it together, and this was before B&M, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, kids out there, this is before B&M was making their masterpieces, okay, their hypers. Togo said, we'll take a crack at it. And so we'll kick it off to Sam. Sam, what are your initial thoughts just looking at this ride, looking at POVs? What do you think about this Togo ride?
I think it sounds like an amazing hyper coaster. And honestly, back when it opened in 1996, it was the tallest roller coaster in the world, which is crazy to think that Togo actually held that spot, because everybody hates on Togo all the time for being crappy, bad, rough, painful, but it actually looks incredibly fun.
Yeah. The trains, before we kick it to Luke, I do want to say the trains look so cool. The gold one, they have a white one with gold kind of design. It just look, when you talk about the king of coasters, it looks like you're about to sit on a throne, man. It looks so cool. Luke, fill in the details. Tell us all about it, man. How is Fujiyama?
I have to admit, I'm going to kind of build you up and let you down gently on this one.
Okay.
Much like the ride, it kind of goes up, has its ups and downs. Basically, the ride starts as you're coming up the ramp. It's kind of got sort of like a large ramp to get up. And when I say that, I mean like the atmosphere is there. They're singing, I don't know if there's any foreign lyrics in there, but all I remember is hearing King of Coaster, King of Coaster. And they start singing this like orchestral song, and I tried to find it online, just anywhere. I didn't know if there was some kind of like I'm a score equivalent, but doesn't exist according to my searches. And one of the best things is, as the train's coming in from that sort of angled brake run, it starts going, now approaching, in sort of like a kind of, they call it English, where it's sort of like, it is English, but it sounds a little, it's kind of got like a little bit of a zest to it, and it's so whimsical, and you can really respect like the fact that they've gone to that length. But moving on to the ride now, as opposed to just getting through the queue and that, it's a bit of a slow build. It kind of takes a while to get up to the top, but when you see the view of Mount Fuji there, it makes it all worthwhile. And one of the best things is the fact that you feel like you're sitting in a shopping cart. Now, I myself, whilst in Japan, also happened to snowboard down Mount Fuji, and I can guarantee you right now from experience, The second scariest thing to snowboard in Mount Fuji is when you're on Fujiyama and you literally you feel like you're pushing like a Walmart shopping cart. It's ridiculous. You're not even on the mountain, but because you're like parallel to it on the horizon, it's like you're going down the side of a mountain, pushing the shopping.
Oh, wow. Because it has weird restraints, right? The restraints look weird.
Yeah, they kind of sat more kind of like at an angle as opposed to a conventional sort of, horizontal bar. But yeah, that was a cool element. And there are a few sort of like twister moments similar to that of Goliath at La Ronde or Wildfire at Silver Dollar City. But I have to admit, what Sam was saying about the people giving Togo a bad rep, I haven't had the best of experiences on them. Let me just grab you case A, or evidence A, I should say. This here is a Razer laptop. This is what I used to do for all my editing. When I went to Yomiuri Land, another park in Japan, I rode their Togo called Bandit. And similar to Fujiyama, there are some very harsh transitions. They're very fun, some serious laterals, but they're enough to break a laptop. I was forced to take it on strapped to my leg in my backpack.
Whoa.
As there's no lockers there. And yeah, I got off the ride. I was like, hang on a minute, why isn't my webcam working? So,
wow.
ride at your own risk. I just still got a low power message there. Welcome back. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah, the thing about
That's
Fujiyama,
crazy.
and I have to ask this because everyone's going to want to know. At the Togo, there are some really sharp transitions, especially that low to the ground turn towards the middle of the ride where you're like 90 degrees right on the ground coming off from a really big drop. Is it as rough as Togos are known to be?
No. I'm saying that so I don't annoy any of your fans. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I'm confusing myself. Basically, it's really, really rough. But I don't know. I mean, you could argue that some people love, for example, B&M inverts. They prefer the rough kind of conventional restraints as opposed to Valraven and Gatekeeper's new designs, So ride at your own risk, I'd say. It's a great experience, but it will knock you senseless.
Yeah, it kind of looked that way. It looks like that's what Manhattan Express should have been because it has the height, and it should have been something like that, and it wasn't. I've been on a couple Togos. I was on Viper at Six Flags Great Adventure before it was removed. I can tell you that was incredibly rough. So if it's anything like that, we were probably getting head bash. Probably legs were getting beat to a pulp.
Yes.
I still don't have any Togo credits.
We got to get you to Las Vegas, man.
Yeah.
You got to get on Manhattan Express. As a coaster enthusiast, every coaster enthusiast needs to at least ride one Togo in their life just to be able to know how bad this manufacturer was, man. Okay, and that's gonna lead us to I think the star attraction, the real king of coasters, maybe in the world. Okay, from what I hear. And that is Eejanaika. Did I say that right?
Probably.
Okay, so
no one says it right. Legend
Eejanaika,
foretells the ride has multiple names. Eejanaika, Eejanaika, Ijibiji.
For those of you in the U.S., think of X2, but better. Sam, why don't you tell everybody what is this crazy named ride? What is Eejanaika?
So this coaster is designed by the godsend of Alan Schilke, who now designs all the awesome RMC coasters that are going all across the world, which is just an amazing guy. So there are 3 of these 4D coasters in the world. One is technically in aerodynamics, which is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Then there's Eejanaika at Fuji-Q Highland, which is an S&S 4D. And then there is Dino Kanda, I think is what it's called. And that is somewhere in China. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I know a few people that have ridden all 3. And they said that Eejanaika is the best one of the 3.
Yeah. this thing looks crazy. And there's one element, Luke, I'm going to have you break down this ride, but there's one element I really want you to talk about too. That's that crazy zero G roll. The most insane zero G roll in the world. Okay. Max Force is the fastest. Okay. Eejanaika looks like it's crazy on that zero G roll. Why don't you talk about it, man? Come on. Tell us how it is. How does it compare to X2? What was your experience on it?
So I visited Fuji-Q for the first time in May of 2019. But for those of you that have followed my channel for a little bit longer than that, you'll know that I turned 25 in California. And I did so by spending a week at Magic Mountain. And on one of those days, I think it was the 9th of January, 2019, I rode X2 39 times in a day. Could have done more, but I needed the toilet. I could have easily done 50. You know, I was trying to do 100, but come on. So anyway, coming back to Eejanaika, I went into it with kind of like a sort of rough idea of what it would be like. I didn't realize that it was actually more similar to the height of Goliath at Magic Mountain, because I think it's about 255 feet as opposed to X2, which is, I think I'm right in saying it's about 170 something, 176 possibly. But there are a few elements that were a little bit overhyped for me. And it wasn't by what other people had said, it was what I'd gone into expecting. Basically, after the first Raven turn, you do sort of like a backward somersault before you come into the zero G roll. And I was expecting that to be so much more intense. You know, the fact that your stomach's kind of dropping whilst you're going up, and then you're going forward at a downward angle, but you're facing up and back. Anyway, I'm going to put this in layman's terms. It was an awesome ride. The bits that surprised me were the elements that I hadn't really given any thought to, such as when you're flipped on your front on the brake run, you know, just a nice little dispersal of momentum there. That was awesome. The zero G roll was superb, mainly because it doesn't feel like a zero G roll. It's kind of like a culmination of multiple elements. But I must admit there are a few elements that I prefer on X2, and that's more so kind of things that are to do with like the environment and the terrain. You know, I love X2's first drop when it kind of goes into that little gulch with the palm trees and things and the fire. But overall, I must say it's a fantastic ride. Definitely worthy of a visit if you're thinking of Japan.
Is it smoother than X2? You know, a lot of people criticize. Yeah.
Hands down, what SNS did, Arrow had paved the way. SNS kind of came in and they reinvented the wheel. However, like I said, you know, a controversial point to be made here. RMCs as a similar kind of manufacturer in the sense of creating smooth and intense rides, they kind of fall a little bit flat on my radar. And the reason is, as much as I love an RMC, shout out to Harkage. I seem to be one of the only enthusiasts that's kind of been on it as of recent. They do so much so quick and so smoothly, it's kind of hard to feel like you're going through multiple transitions so quickly. But it looks cool to anyone who's too scared to ride, and if you're trying to impress a girl or a guy or both, whatever you're into, you know, it looks cool. If they're not brave enough to go on the ride and you've gone on it, they're going to think you're a superstar. So
yeah. Sam, was there any, you know, because this is a bucket list park and definitely a bucket list coaster for me and you. When you're looking at this ride, is there any elements that you look at and go, oh man, that's the element I can't wait for?
Well, see, I've never experienced a 4D coaster before, so I'm just super excited for the 4D element and spinning. Like, I mean, the closest thing I get to that right now is like the Joker clones at the Six Flags, but that's on a mini scale compared to like X2 and Eejanaika and Dinoconda. So that's mainly what I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, the two elements for me when I look at Eejanaika, I look at that zero G roll just because, like you said, Luke, it doesn't look like it looks like a zero G roll on off ride, but when you see it on ride, I don't know if there's another roll like that in the world, you know. And
it's really weird.
So I really want to experience that, but that final brake run, for those of you who don't know, you come into the brake run and it just, bloop, bloop. I mean, it puts you down on your stomach and back up real quick. And it looks like you're going to smack the railings, right? It looks like you're going to smack into those railings.
You're really close. When you get to the end, it's like, there's my feet. There's where my feet should be, but I'm on my face.
Yeah. I can't wait for that just because no other coaster does that. Those are very specific to Eejanaika. So if you had to say, because we can't say, we've not been on them, but if you had to say what the best ride in the park is, what would you say the best one is?
Eejanaika, hands down.
Yeah. It looks like that from our perspective. It looks like that. Would you agree, Sam?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be the best ride in the park. But although I would want my hands up, not hands down, Luke.
Yeah. Okay, so the next section of our video today is going to be what additions does the park need? And if correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, but the problem with additions when we talk about this is the space that they have to work with. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. It's a very kind of like it's similar to a lot of parks in the sense where they've kind of got all of these big ambitious rides, but the only reason they work is because they all kind of intertwine or they're very kind of close to one another. I mean, there are slots, for example, just to the side of Eejanaika. I believe I think they might have got rid of the wild mouse recently, or there were some plans leaked where they had enough space to build kind of adjacent to Eejanaika. But the thing is, this plays a part in a lot of things, more than you'd think it would, more than you'd give it credit for. But a lot of parks don't tend to like to have two massive rides next to each other. They prefer to kind of space them out, to distribute kind of crowds and people. So to have something like, let's say, an RMC Strata Hypo Giga T-Rex thing next to it, it's kind of going to overshadow the glory of Eejanaika. So.
Yeah.
But fingers crossed,
Well, what would you say the park needs? What would you say, what additions do you think the park, just for the overall best interest of the park?
I mean, I must admit, I got to ride a few other coasters around. We've just blacked out. I'm sorry about that. What is this, I-305?
That's okay.
I'll get back to you on that question. I'm just going to plug you in. And whilst I plug you in, I'm going to take you on a behind-the-scenes tour of Luke E94. You ready? Do you want to see what happens behind Luke E94?
Let's do it.
Okay. This is exactly what happens behind Luke E94. Did you like that?
Yeah, I liked it.
As you can see, not much happens behind me. But we'll get back into the swing of things now. I'm just going to set this up here. Technical difficulties, please stand by.
That's okay. That makes this more real. We are live. He really is overseas in England right now, and this kind of thing happens, so we're gonna keep it in here because this is realism, man.
Absolutely. So before I got a low battery warning. Back to the question. Yeah.
What addition? What do you think the park needs more of to overall benefit the park itself?
I mean, we've already kind of ticked on the fact that the park approaches with kind of extreme thrill rides in mind, and a lot of people get on Do-Dodonpa and Eejanaika, and they come off it thinking nothing of it. So to introduce something like a family coaster or something a bit tamer would kind of feel a little bit kind of unnecessary. You're targeting a demographic that isn't necessarily there, but you do obviously expand as a result to more people that are looking to bring families. That being said, I'd probably say something along the lines of, I'd love an interim prefab, but that's wishful thinking. Perhaps a GCI. I think a nice GCI coaster, similar to a Leviathan that's being built at SeaWorld in Australia, with the seats in the rear being backwards. That would be very fitting, considering if they made it perhaps like the tallest GCI or something equally record-breaking. That would be a good shout, I think.
Yeah. What do you think, Sam? What additions do you think Fuji-Q Highland could use?
I'm going to touch on the wooden coaster too, because they got 4 main steel coasters, And I think a wooden coaster would be in good order for the park. I think it would bring a whole new dynamic to the park. But maybe like a gravity group.
Yeah, good shout. Good shout.
Yeah, could you imagine? I don't space. I'm sure they couldn't do this for space reasons, but could you? Well, I'll go a different route. I was gonna say Voyage. Could you imagine a Voyage there? You know, something like Voyage there. There's just with Eejanaika and Do-Dodonpa, and all of a sudden you got a Voyage too. It'd be like, oh my gosh, okay, you guys are a little OP, overpowered. Okay, but what if they did something like a Boardwalk Bullet?
I mean, that's definitely an option. What the Texans managed to do with Boardwalk Bullet was amazing. If you've seen aerial shots of this ride, you'll notice that it's so compact, but yet it's an incredibly forceful ride. I know there was some rushes in production, so the initial drop wasn't as intense as it was intended to be. Therefore, the second half of the ride does fall a little bit flatter than expected. But I mean, there are rides out there that are designed to have, a better first half and then a tamer second half, and vice versa. One of my favourite rides, which also comes back into what sort of ride would work at the park here, is Maverick at Cedar Point. Oh. Now, that ride has multiple kind of paces. At first you've got the rapid transitions and then the launch halfway through. And I think a ride like that would also be very, very awesome to experience at Fuji-Q Highland.
Yeah, because it would give something different. Yes, you have Do-Dodonpa that is just, pedal to the metal, and let's just push you back in your seat as much as we can. But other than the one loop, it doesn't focus on inversions. It's got an inversion, but it doesn't focus on that. It would be cool to have something that had multiple inversions, that had the airtime, because Do-Dodonpa, it doesn't have airtime, right?
There you go.
But if you had something that
grounded.
Man, but I'm just thinking of those two airtime hills on Maverick are just so ripe with airtime, and it's so awesome to get me being a bigger guy. Anything that could throw me out of my seat to me is heaven. Okay, throw me on it, let me go. So I agree. I think it'd be cool, but I do think that they are missing that wooden coaster.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's the problem. And as much as I'd like to see a ride like a lightning rod, that launches you a little bit, but just crazy airtime, something like that would be cool with RMC. But I don't know if realistically RMC can build in Japan. I don't know. I know that they have a lot of logistics. They were using Vekoma for a while to build overseas. So maybe that could happen. But I think, gravity groups and stuff, they obviously work overseas. So that would be great. So is GCI. So I agree, guys. I think that'd be cool. Oh, wouldn't it be awesome if it was one of those new GCIs with the Infinity Flyers that have the steel spine versions and stuff?
That would be sweet.
That'd be sweet. So now that we've gotten a good feel for the rides and the attractions at the park, we want to kind of shift gears a little bit because, as we all know, when you visit a theme park, it is not all about the rides, guys. There is other things to experience. I'm excited about the next one. This is food. Okay, let's talk a little bit about food because in your review, Luke, you tried some really awesome food, it looks like, and some mystery stuff. Why don't you talk about the food, man? Tell us about it.
To begin with, I saw some kind of things on the menu that looked familiar. So I chose the cheese balls, the deep fried cheese balls, which obviously you'll see how good they were in the video. I do go into exquisite detail. And then following on from that, I saw something else that looked familiar, which was, in my eyes, a chicken burger. Whatever it was, it weren't a chicken burger. It was very kind of tough and chewy, but it was almost like it tasted sort of like a very sort of coarse meat, very gamey kind of meat. And I'm convinced it was either squid or octopus. But I then washed it down with something that can only be described as the off product of the Hulk because it was bright green. And turns out it was melon Fanta. So definitely wasn't what I thought.
That sounds amazing.
It was pretty good.
Yeah,
I might be slightly radioactive. I haven't turned into Spider-Man just yet, but who knows?
it looked like, and maybe talks more to the culture of Japan. Excuse me, it's culture of Japan, and that is, it looked like a lot of stuff fried on sticks.
Yep.
Is that a lot of the food, and is that more Fuji-Q Highland's take on it, or is that pretty much just the culture of Japan?
I mean, it follows on from similar kind of cultural aspects, like in America, where you've got corn dogs, which I guess you could argue is a deep fried hot dog on a stick. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different experience because of the way it's prepared, but in essence, it bears similarities. And in Japan, it's kind of like they're known for having food such as yakitori, which is chicken on a stick. And the park kind of tends to one up that, and it's like, okay, well, if you like chicken on a stick, you'll probably like squid on a stick, and pickle Rick on a stick. You know, there's all sorts of weird things out there. So
that's cool. Sam, did you pick up on any food items, or did you, when you were looking at Luke's video, did anything stick out to you as something you want to try whenever eventually we get over there?
Any of the two things that I had?
Yeah. Well, definitely the burger. It sounds awesome. I love trying all different types of food. I'm a big food junkie. It's not a bad thing. But I think that to me, I guess the food reminded me of something that, like, you would see at like a state fair. I know, like, up here in Wisconsin, the state fair focuses on just all different crazy food combinations and who can come up with the craziest type of food. And I mean, I've had some crazy food there. Like, I had like Cajun battered frog legs once. I had like barbecue pork stuffed Bismarck donut.
Wow.
Yeah, like, it's crazy up here what type of stuff we can get at the state fair.
Yeah, it does
that's sort of
like
the that's sort of the food that it kind of reminded me of, the food that, or the stylistic food that you would get at like a state fair.
Did you notice, Luke? Do they offer any alcoholic beverages in the park? Did you notice anything like that?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know they are commonplace. For example, throughout Tokyo, you'll find vending machines that you can just put money in, grab a beer, grab some sake. For those of you that don't know, sake is kind of like a very alcoholic sort of, kind of like absinthe. It's very strong. It's a very rich kind of drink. But,
yeah, that's cool. And one of our last segments is more about the park in general. And we kind of briefly touched on some of the points that I want to bring up in the beginning of this video, but that is the operations of the park, because they have some weird operations, right? Or not weird, but some cool operations. And specifically, Luke, why don't you talk about your experience with the facial recognition and how that works, and the locker system? How does all that work there?
So basically, there are a few kind of rides throughout Japan that offer a bit of an unorthodox kind of system to get on these rides. Obviously, the most notable being Eejanaika, where you're forced to, one, go through facial recognition, to then go to a locker to put your shoes in, just your shoes, nothing else. And then they give you a key for your locker and a bit of string around your wrist. So it's all kind of very, you go through it, and it's very dystopian. You start off and you think, wow, this is awesome. You know, I'm in some kind of 2050 futuristic kind of Terminator film. And then as you kind of go to the locker and you see that effectively your shoes and all of your belongings are attached to a bit of string, it seems kind of like they ran off with the idea a bit too much and kind of tried to reel it back in. But I mean, it works. It's a system, but you would think they'd have like fingerprint scanners or something for the lockers if they're going to do it for your face. So.
Yeah, and you didn't have to pay for any of the lockers though, right? It's all free.
If you want one by the entrance of the park, you have to. I think you pay a very, very tiny amount, a couple of bucks. But you can just take your stuff up onto the ride and then put it on the on-ride lockers. So that is an option.
Do you find, with this system, do you think that this would work well in the U.S. for for the locker situation, anyways. Maybe the facial recognition, but would those translate well to American parks or no?
I mean, there are instances across America where I found the options have been there and they've caused more problems than solved. One notable example is Twisted Colossus at Magic Mountain, which has got the packs on the back of the seat and storage bins. And it causes an issue with a lot of families that sit there and think, I could be racing that train right now on this Mobius designed track, but instead I can't decide if I should put my phone in front of me or in that bin. So the underlying factor here is it should either be heavily instated before you get on the ride, and then the lockers are as you come off. So it's kind of lockers here, go in, go out, get back to locker. Or at the end of the day, it's based on an honor system. So it could be on the platform, put your stuff in, take your stuff out as you leave. But as someone who's traveled to a lot, and I mean a lot of the amusement parks across the US, I've had multiple things stolen, mainly souvenir cups and things. But it's hard to say. I'm sure it'd translate well for a little while, but all it would take is one bad egg to kind of overthrow the whole thing and send it all into chaos.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Just because it seems so cool and so revolutionary over there.
Absolutely.
So one thing with the operations that I want to touch on is it appears that some of the rides, at least Eejanaika that I find, does this little pre-show thing in the station with the ride operators and with the guests right as the train is dispatched, right before the train dispatches. And Eejanaika is cool because they're all screaming Eejanaika, people are clapping, people are going crazy in the queue line, and they get you super pumped up and then send you on your way. And as cool as that is, I've always wondered, does that affect capacity? Does that affect the dispatches? And if it does, how bad does it affect things?
It's definitely incorporated. It's definitely a significant factor. But what the Japanese tend to do is when the train's coming in from the brake run or entering the station, you're not sort of sitting there waiting as if they owe you some kind of recompense for your time. But instead, it's more to kind of engage you, keep you focused, and to take your mind off of the fact that you've just been assigned a row, because in Japan you're unfortunately not necessarily allowed to pick where you can go. So it's kind of implemented in a nice way, just to take your mind off things.
That's not, you say you can't really pick your row. Can you like sweet talk the ride ops into giving you a row? Do they listen to that at all? Like if you had a translator, could you be like, whisper sweet nothings in their ear and get me on the back row of Eejanaika, please?
I mean, yeah, it worked for me. They tend to do it more for a balancing issue. One notable example was when I went to Tobu Zoo and rode Kawasemi, which is Japanese for kingfisher. It's the park's Intamin Megalight, and basically it's only, I think it's got about 3 trains on it, each holding 4 seats, if I'm not mistaken. And there was one point where it was me and one other person, and they would say either front or back. And then when I was on my own, they said it didn't really matter. But one phrase that you can always try and hope for the best is if you say sumimasen, which is excuse me, and then you'd point to the row that you'd like, and all you'd have to say is kore o kudasai, which is KOREO KUDESI, kore o kudasai, which means this one, please. And either they'll say yes or no, hai or ie.
So all you American riders or anybody else from any country that's watching right now, when you go to Japan, learn those 2 small, simple phrases. It could make your life so much better when you're trying to get on a specific row. Sam, with operations, was there anything that you saw in your research for the show about operations? Was there anything that stood out to you at all?
I think that a lot of the ways that they're doing their operations are quite innovative. I don't know how well they would work over here. I guess if they could figure out a locker system, I guess similar to like what Yukon Striker did at Canada's Wonderland with like the conveyor belt lockers, that would be awesome.
That would be really cool. yeah, I just wonder how it would translate. Just cool, just different. It's cool to see different parks in the world doing different things and trying new stuff out. I think that's awesome, especially for a small park like Fuji-Q Highland. Um, that's going to lead us just right into kind of ending the show and wrapping the show up. And what we're going to do is we're each going to take a few minutes here or however long and just give our overall thoughts of the park. Just from researching this, I love what the park has done. The park said, okay, we don't have a lot of space. Let's jam pack it with the most extreme, thrill rides we can. Let's make this a destination park for all coaster enthusiasts. They've done that. And then what they did is I almost feel like they probably looked at the location first and said, let's put the most insane thrill rides with the most gorgeous backdrop of Mount Fuji, okay, in the background. And so for me, this is a destination park. For me, Eejanaika and Do-Dodonpa are destination coasters for me. Takabisha, I can get that in the U.S. now. Fujiyama, I can get hypercoasters. But you cannot get Eejanaika. You cannot get Do-Dodonpa. And so for those reasons, I would travel. I would spend the money on airfare, spend the money on hotels and everything else just to get on those two coasters. Sam, why don't you give us your overall thoughts of this park?
I think it really is a destination park for most coaster enthusiasts simply because of those 4 coasters, but mainly because of Do-Dodonpa and Eejanaika. And I think someday I'd really like to get there, that's for sure. But just the overall atmosphere, with it being so close to Mount Fuji, you get the scenery. And I'm all about scenery and things like that on rides too. I think that's a big part of the ride experience is what are you looking at when you're on top of the lift hill, or what are you looking at, or what maneuvers are you going around, what theming are you going around, all that type of thing. That to me adds to the ride experience. And that's pretty important to me on when I rate my coasters and things like that.
Absolutely. And then Luke, why don't you take us home with your overall thoughts of this park, and how does it rank with all the other parks that you've been to in Japan and stuff like that?
So it's definitely up there with one of the better ones I did in Japan. Although coming on to what Sam said, the sights, the sounds, the whole experience really kind of encapsulates the experience for me as well as an enthusiast. And I had, some fantastic days at Fuji-Q. I had some awesome days at Nagashima Spa Land. Where else did I go? Universal Studios Japan and Tobu Zoo. Now, each of the parks I love for their own reasons. However, I do seem to be one of the only enthusiasts on the planet that liked Tobu Zoo. So definitely check it out. One of the parks I'd probably say you have to experience just for a total laugh and to be completely surprised that this is even a thing is the secret 5th park that I visited, which was Shima Park España. I think I'm saying that right.
Okay.
Or Shima Spain Village. It's home to a B&M invert known as Pyrenees. That was a really, really underwhelming coaster. It was so... it just hit the mid-course breaks and then there was nothing there. It was just a straightaway and, back into the station. But coming back to Fuji-Q, if anything, these other parks that I went to were great, but none could really live up to the ride collection of Fuji-Q. So check them out if you're in the area, but if you want extreme thrills, Fuji-Q is the way to go.
Awesome. So guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Talk Around the Park, Fuji-Q Highland edition. We want to say definitely a special thank you to you, Luke, for taking the time out of your day and connecting with us all the way from England and giving your experience. Guys, if you are not subscribed to Luke's channel, head over there right now, Luke E94. You can see it right there on his nameplate, which is down there. But make sure to do it. Because man, if you guys want to see parks from all over the world, tons and tons of parks here in the U.S., you've gotta subscribe to his channel. Just, it's kind of like, where's Waldo, right? It's like, where is he in the world, man? He's somewhere right now. So keep up to date with him. It's awesome content, guys. And of course, Sam, thank you for everything you do here at Maxx and helping us with all the different moving parts of Maxx. And you're awesome, man. And being on our admin team is really pushing us to the next level. So thank you for being on the show as well. Guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Remember to always take your thrills to the max, because this is Thrill Max.
Oh, yeah.